Chapter 1. You don't need to be brilliant to make great things. The world makes creative work seem like magic. We look at geniuses and imagine they were born with some rare ability, something that makes their work extraordinary. But that's not true. The truth is, creativity isn't about being a lone genius. It's about being part of a community, showing your work, and letting ideas grow through connection. The myth of the genius has done more harm than good for people who want to create. The good news is, you don't have to be one. Real creativity isn't about sitting alone in a room, waiting for lightning to strike. It's about putting yourself in situations where inspiration can find you. And the best way to do that? Start by embracing the idea of being an amateur. Amateurs aren't weighed down by pressure or obsessed with perfection. They're simply people who love what they do and are willing to try, willing to show up and share. The amateur has an advantage over the professional. They're open. They don't claim to have all the answers. They're curious, eager to learn, and excited about sharing what they find. Amateurs don't wait to be perfect. They dive in, make mistakes, and improve by doing. When you start thinking like an amateur, you stop worrying about being the smartest person in the room and start connecting with others who want to figure things out too. When you embrace being an amateur, you give yourself permission to create without fear. You aren't trying to impress anyone. You're just playing, experimenting, and exploring. You don't have to act like you know everything. In fact, it's better if you don't. The people who inspire us the most aren't always the experts. They're often the people who are figuring things out right in front of us and inviting us along for the ride. You've probably been told that great minds think alike, but that's nonsense. Great minds think together. The best creative work doesn't happen in isolation. It's built on conversations, connections, and shared ideas. Even the so-called lone geniuses, the Da Vincis and the Einsteins, were surrounded by people who influenced, challenged, and inspired them. Creativity thrives in networks. You don't have to be brilliant. You just have to be willing to plug in. Your job isn't to create something perfect right away. Your job is to start sharing what you know, what you're learning, and what excites you. Sharing your work doesn't mean showing off. It means opening a window into your process, your ideas, your discoveries. People aren't just interested in what you've finished. They want to see how you got there. Process is more interesting than polish. But here's the thing, you don't need to know everything before you start. In fact, you never will. What matters is that you show up, ask questions, and stay curious. Curiosity is what keeps you moving forward. It's what fuels your creativity. When you focus on being curious instead of being brilliant, everything changes. When you stop trying to be a genius and start sharing what you know, you connect with others who are on the same journey. You find your people, the ones who get what you're trying to do and who want to see you succeed. Those connections are what keep you going. They're what push your work further than you could have imagined on your own. Think of yourself as part of a great conversation, one that started long before you showed up and will continue long after you're gone. Your job is to listen, learn, and add your voice. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room. You just have to be someone who's willing to speak up and share what they're learning. The best way to begin? Start by documenting what you're doing. Write about what you're working on, what you're experimenting with, what you're thinking about. Don't wait until you've got it all figured out. Share as you go. Show the sketches, the half-formed ideas, the little sparks that might turn into something bigger. People love seeing the behind-the-scenes work, not just the finished masterpiece. You might worry that what you're sharing isn't good enough. But here's the truth. You don't have to be perfect to connect with people. In fact, your imperfections, your messes, your mistakes are what make you relatable. People don't want perfect. They want real. They want to see the bumps and detours along the way, because that's what makes the finished product even more meaningful. Creativity is a process, not a destination. There's no finish line where you suddenly become a creative genius. The best creative people are the ones who keep learning, keep exploring, and keep sharing what they find. They aren't waiting to be discovered. They're putting themselves out there, day after day, no matter what. So forget the myth of the genius. Forget the pressure to have it all figured out. Instead, embrace being an amateur. Show up, stay curious, and share what excites you. The people who need to see your work will find you, but only if you're brave enough to show your work in the first place. Chapter 2. Trust the process. Creativity grows as you go. Too many people are obsessed with the finished product, the shiny, perfect thing that gets presented to the world. But the truth is, most of what makes creative work interesting isn't the end result. It's how you get there. the messy middle, the experiments, the failures, the discoveries. That's where the magic happens. The problem is, we're taught to hide our process. We're taught that no one wants to see the unfinished stuff. We worry that if we show too much, we'll spoil the final reveal. But that's backward. People aren't just interested in what you make. They're interested in how you make it. Think about the last time you watched a behind-the-scenes documentary. Seeing how something was made, the rough sketches, the mistakes, the revisions, makes you appreciate the final piece even more. It gives you a story to connect with. The process turns the product into something meaningful. When you focus on your process, you stop obsessing over perfection. You realize that creative work isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking better questions. It's about trying things, making mistakes, and figuring it out as you go. Your process is what makes you unique. No one else works the way you do. No one else thinks quite like you or makes decisions the way you do. By sharing your process, you're inviting people into your world, and that's what makes your work feel authentic. Start by documenting your process. Keep track of what you're working on, what you're thinking about, and what's inspiring you. Snap a photo of your workspace. Take notes on the problems you're trying to solve. Collect the bits and pieces that are feeding your creativity. The goal isn't to turn your process into a performance. You don't have to stage your workspace or fake some kind of creative ritual. Just be honest. Share what's real. If your desk is a mess, show the mess. If you're stuck on a problem, talk about being stuck. People appreciate honesty more than polish. One of the best ways to share your process is to talk about what you're learning. When you figure something out, even something small, share it. Don't hoard your knowledge. Teaching what you know isn't just generous. It's smart. It helps you connect with others who are trying to learn the same things. When you share your process, you make your work feel alive. People can see the story unfolding in real time. They get invested. They start to root for you. They want to see where things go next. It turns your audience into your collaborators, people who are excited to see you succeed. The great thing about focusing on process is that it frees you from the pressure to be perfect. Instead of worrying about making something flawless, you can focus on making something interesting. The process gives you permission to experiment, to play, to try things that might not work. When you share your process, you're also giving yourself a better perspective on your own work. Putting your thoughts down forces you to step back and reflect. You start to see patterns you hadn't noticed before. You make connections between ideas that seemed unrelated. Sharing your process isn't just about showing your work to others. It's about helping yourself understand what you're actually doing. Don't be afraid to show the ugly stuff. The mistakes, the misfires, the ideas that didn't pan out. That's what makes your story real. Creativity isn't a straight path. It's a zigzagging mess of wrong turns and dead ends. Embrace that mess. Share it. People love seeing someone struggle through the creative process because they're struggling too. When you show your process, you're giving people something to relate to. You're showing them that they're not alone. And here's the secret. The more you share your process, the better you get. Every time you put your work out there, even if it's unfinished, you invite feedback. You create opportunities to connect with others who can teach you something new. Sharing your process helps you grow. The biggest mistake you can make is waiting until your work is perfect before you share it. There's no such thing as perfect. If you keep waiting for the right moment, you'll never show anything at all. Instead, start small. Share a sketch, a sentence, a note about what's on your mind. Build a habit of showing up and sharing what you're working on. You might think no one cares, but they do. People want to see what you're making. They want to hear what you're thinking about. They want to follow your journey, but they can't, unless you let them in. So stop hiding your process. Show the sketches. Show the scraps. Show the things you're still figuring out. You'll be surprised by how many people want to see the work in progress. The truth is, the process isn't just part of the work. The process is the work. Chapter 3. Don't wait. Share something today. You don't have to be a master storyteller or a marketing genius to get your work out there. You just have to show up and share a little bit every day. That's it. No big reveals, no dramatic launches, just small, consistent glimpses into what you're doing. Sharing your work doesn't mean spamming people with endless self-promotion. It means finding interesting, meaningful ways to let people peek inside your creative process. It's about giving people something to connect with, something they can follow and root for. Start by thinking small. Instead of waiting for a big project to be finished before you share it, break it into pieces. Show the bits and scraps, the sketches, the rough drafts, the little moments that are building towards something bigger. These small glimpses don't just fill the gaps between your major projects. They are the project. Every day you're making progress, even if it's just thinking through a new idea or experimenting with something you're unsure about. Those moments are worth sharing. Show the behind-the-scenes stuff, the messy desk, the torn-up notes, the version you almost gave up on. That's the stuff people connect with. The key is to treat sharing like a habit, something you do regularly, without overthinking it. If you're a writer, share a sentence you wrote today. If you're a musician, post a few seconds of a riff you're working on. If you're a designer, snap a photo of your sketchbook. Don't wait until you feel like your work is perfect. Share what's interesting right now. You might be worried that what you're sharing is too trivial, too small to matter, but small things add up. The more you share, the more you create a rhythm, a steady flow of ideas that people can follow. Sharing daily isn't about impressing people with finished work. It's about inviting them along for the ride. The trick is to find a way of sharing that feels natural to you. Maybe you like writing long blog posts. Maybe you prefer snapping quick photos. Maybe recording a short video feels easier. Don't force yourself into a format that doesn't fit. Just find the simplest way to show what you're working on. The easiest way to keep sharing is to focus on what you're already doing. If you're keeping a notebook, post a page from it. If you're saving inspiring quotes, share one. If you're learning something new, talk about it. Sharing doesn't have to be extra work. It's about turning your everyday creative habits into something other people can follow. Think about what you can share that might be helpful to someone else. A helpful link, a tip you just figured out, or even a mistake you made. These things are valuable. People love learning from someone who's figuring things out in real time. Sharing your process isn't just about showing your wins. It's about being honest with your struggles too. When you start sharing regularly, you'll build an archive, a trail of breadcrumbs that shows how your work has evolved. Looking back at that archive can be powerful. You'll see the connections between ideas that seemed unrelated. You'll see your progress, the way you've improved, the things you've learned, and you'll have something to point people toward when they ask what you've been working on. Don't fall into the trap of thinking you need to post only your best stuff. Trying to curate everything down to perfection will only slow you down. Instead, focus on sharing what feels interesting or meaningful in the moment. It doesn't have to be polished. It just has to be real. The best way to stay consistent is to keep it simple. Don't make sharing a huge production. Make it part of your routine. If you're already keeping track of your ideas in a notebook, start sharing pages from it. If you're experimenting with new techniques, snap a photo of your setup. If you're writing every morning, pull out a sentence or two that you like. The point is to build momentum, to make sharing a regular part of your creative life. You don't need to be constantly online or glued to social media. The goal isn't to bombard people with endless updates. It's to build a steady, meaningful presence. By sharing small things regularly, you create a rhythm, a heartbeat, that people can follow. They start to expect to hear from you, and they start to feel connected to your process. There will be days when you don't feel like sharing, when you're stuck, frustrated, or unsure if anything you're making is worth showing. Share those moments too. Show people the messy middle, the doubt, the trial and error, the stuff that doesn't quite work. That's what makes your story relatable. That's what makes people care. When you build a habit of sharing your work, you stop feeling like you have to chase attention. Instead, you create a space where people can find you. They don't have to wonder what you're working on. They'll know because you've been showing them all along. Most importantly, don't overthink it. Share a little something every day. A photo, a sentence, a note. Keep it simple, keep it real, and keep showing up. Those small daily moments will add up to something bigger, a body of work that people will care about because they've been part of the journey. Chapter 4. Show the ideas that shape your creativity. If you want to build an audience, you have to be interesting. But being interesting doesn't mean you have to be someone you're not. The best way to be interesting is to be yourself, and more importantly, to share what you genuinely care about. Your interests, your obsessions, your weird little fascinations. These things are gold. They're what make your creative voice unique. The things you're drawn to, the books you read, the music you listen to, the ideas that won't leave you alone. These are all clues to who you are and what kind of work you're meant to make. Everyone should have a cabinet of curiosities, a personal collection of things that inspire, puzzle, or delight you. It doesn't have to be a literal cabinet, though it could be. It could be a folder on your computer, a notebook full of clippings, or a wall covered in sticky notes. The point is to create a space where you can gather the things that feed your creativity. Start by collecting what catches your eye. Don't judge it. Don't worry if it seems random or unrelated to your work. Just grab what speaks to you. The best creative minds are sponges. They absorb ideas from everywhere. They know that inspiration rarely comes from staring harder at their own project. It comes from stepping away, getting curious, and exploring new territory. Your cabinet of curiosities is where you build your creative vocabulary. It's where you collect bits and pieces that excite you, things that might spark something later. A sentence from a book, a photo from a magazine, a lyric from a song. All these little fragments can connect in surprising ways. When you keep a collection like this, you start to see patterns. You notice themes that keep showing up. You see how one idea sparks another, and when you get stuck, your collection is there to pull you out of the rut. It's like a backup brain, a reserve of inspiration you can tap into whenever you need it. Don't be afraid to share what's in your cabinet. People are drawn to curiosity. When you talk about the things that fascinate you, you naturally connect with others who are excited about the same things. Sharing your influences doesn't dilute your originality. It amplifies it. Instead of trying to prove how brilliant you are, focus on showing what inspires you. Share the books you're reading, the articles you're bookmarking, the artists you're obsessed with. Shine a light on the things that are feeding your creativity. People will start to see your influences, and more importantly, they'll start to understand how you think. When you share what excites you, you make room for conversation. The things you love are the starting point for connecting with others. They give people a way in, a reason to follow what you're doing. There's no such thing as a wrong influence. The things you love might seem random, but that randomness is part of what makes your work unique. The weird combination of your interests, that's your creative DNA. The trick is to embrace those quirks, not hide them. Sharing your influences isn't about impressing people. It's about being generous. You're saying, hey, look at this cool thing I found. Maybe it'll inspire you too. When you share what inspires you, you're inviting others to build on those ideas, remix them, and create something new. Think of your influences like ingredients. The more diverse your ingredients, the more surprising your final dish will be. Don't limit yourself to the same sources everyone else is drawing from. If you only follow the trends and read the same books as everyone else, your work will feel predictable. Instead, dig deeper. Go off the beaten path. Follow your weird instincts. You don't have to be an expert on the things you're sharing. Curiosity is enough. In fact, showing that you're still learning, that you're still figuring things out, makes you more relatable. People like to follow someone who's discovering things in real time. Be careful not to hoard your influences. Don't let your cabinet of curiosities become a black hole where ideas go to die. The point isn't to gather things just for the sake of it. The point is to turn those sparks of inspiration into something new. The best way to keep your ideas fresh is to share them. Write about what you're reading. Post about the ideas that are lighting you up. Show people the sources that are feeding your creativity. The more you share your influences, the more you strengthen your own creative identity. Your cabinet of curiosities is proof that your ideas aren't born out of thin air. They're part of a larger conversation. By sharing what inspires you, you're inviting people to see where your ideas come from. And when people understand your influences, they start to connect with your work in a deeper way. So start building your collection. Gather the things that spark your curiosity, the things you can't stop thinking about. And don't be afraid to share them. People don't just want to see what you make. They want to see what makes you. Chapter 5. Your story can change everything. Your work isn't enough. No matter how brilliant or groundbreaking it might be, it won't speak for itself. People need context. They need a reason to care. That's where storytelling comes in. Stories are how we make sense of the world. They're how we connect with ideas and, more importantly, with people. If you want people to care about your work, you have to tell a story about it. A good story makes your work memorable. It gives people something to hold on to. The good news is, you don't have to be a master storyteller to do this. You just need to get comfortable talking about your work, where it came from, what inspired it, and why it matters to you. Start by asking yourself a simple question. Where does this come from? Every piece of creative work has a backstory. Maybe it started as a random thought in the shower. Maybe it came from a mistake you made. Maybe it's something you've been obsessed with for years. Whatever the case, there's always a story behind the work. You just have to find it. People love hearing about process. They love hearing about the messy middle, the mistakes, the setbacks, the unexpected turns. Don't just tell people what you made. Tell them how you made it. Show them the journey, the weird ideas that didn't work, the doubts you wrestled with, the breakthroughs that pushed you forward. The best stories are honest. Don't try to make your work sound cooler than it is. Don't fake drama or exaggerate your achievements. People can spot that kind of thing from a mile away. Instead, focus on being real. Talk about what excites you. Talk about what scared you. Talk about what you learned along the way. Don't be afraid to show your flaws. Imperfections make your story better. If you struggled with something, share that struggle. If you doubted yourself, admit it. People connect with honesty far more than they connect with perfection. Every good story has characters, and in your story, you are the main character. But you don't have to act like a superhero. You don't have to be some brilliant, all-knowing genius. Just be yourself, someone who's figuring things out as they go. Your story also needs stakes. People need to understand why your work matters. Maybe you're solving a problem that's been bugging you for years. Maybe you're exploring a question that won't leave you alone. Maybe you're trying to connect with a feeling or an experience that's hard to describe. Whatever the stakes are, share them. Show people why they should care. The more personal your story feels, the more universal it becomes. People may not connect with your specific project, but they'll connect with the emotions behind it, the excitement, the frustration, the curiosity. That's what pulls people in. If you're not sure how to tell your story, start by answering a few questions. What inspired this? What problem are you trying to solve? What surprised you along the way? What did you learn? Those questions will give you the raw material for a good story. You don't have to get fancy. Just be honest and clear. Think of your work like a movie. Every good movie has 3 parts. The beginning, where you introduce the idea. The middle, where you struggle and experiment. And the end, where you figure it out or land somewhere unexpected. If you shape your story that way, people will stay engaged. They'll want to know what happens next. Sometimes the best way to tell your story is to let other people tell it for you. If someone says something great about your work, share it. If someone asks you a good question that sparks a conversation, share that too. People love hearing how others are reacting to your work. It makes the story feel bigger. Don't assume people know what's interesting about your work. You have to show them. What seems obvious to you may be fascinating to someone else. What feels like a small moment might be the thing that sticks with someone the most. The details matter. Don't skip them. Your story doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to feel real. The best stories aren't polished monologues. They're conversations. Invite people into your world. Show them what's important to you. Be open, be curious, and let your story evolve. Most of all, remember that your story isn't just about you. It's about your audience, too. Think about what they might relate to, what might inspire them, what might make them feel seen. The more your story resonates with others, the more your work will stick with them. So start telling your story. Don't overthink it. Don't wait for the perfect words. Just talk about what you're making, why it matters, and what you're learning along the way. People don't just want to see your work, they want to hear the story behind it. Chapter 6. Share what you've learned. You don't have to be an expert to teach. You just have to be willing to share what you know, even if you're still figuring things out yourself. Too many people think that teaching is something reserved for masters, but the truth is, the best teachers are often just one step ahead. They're the ones who remember what it's like to struggle with something new. They know what it feels like to be confused. And they know how to explain things in a way that actually makes sense. If you know how to do something, anything, you can teach it. Teaching isn't about being the smartest person in the room, it's about being generous. It's about taking what you've learned and putting it out there so someone else can use it. You don't need a classroom or a podium, you just need a place to share. It could be a blog post, a video tutorial, or even a tweet. Whatever format feels natural to you, that's the one you should use. The important thing is that you're taking what you know and making it available to others. Start small. Share a tip you figured out. Write about a problem you recently solved. Show your process, the steps you took to make something happen. Those little bits of knowledge might seem obvious to you, but to someone else, they could be game-changing. Don't be afraid to share what you're still figuring out. People love to watch someone learn in real time. If you're trying to master a new skill or solve a tricky problem, document that process. Show the false starts, the bad ideas, the stuff that didn't work. When you let people in on your learning process, they don't just learn from your successes, they learn from your mistakes too. The best teachers are the ones who admit they don't have all the answers. They're the ones who are still asking questions, still experimenting, still exploring. That's what makes their teaching feel alive. It's rooted in curiosity, not arrogance. You don't need to know everything, just teach what you know today. The things you've figured out might seem small, but to someone who hasn't learned them yet, they're huge. The things that feel obvious to you are exactly what someone else needs to hear. One of the best ways to teach is to explain things the way you wish someone had explained them to you. Think back to when you were just starting out. What did you struggle with? What advice would have saved you time and frustration? Teach that. When you teach what you know, you create a connection. You stop being just a creator. You become someone who's helping others. And when people learn from you, they remember you. They become invested in what you're doing. They start to see you not just as someone who makes cool stuff, but as someone who's worth paying attention to. Don't hold back because you're afraid of giving away your secrets. There's no such thing as giving away too much. The more you share, the more people will trust you, and the more they'll want to follow your work. Teaching doesn't just build your audience, it builds your credibility. The best part about teaching is that it forces you to understand your own work better. When you explain something to someone else, you're forced to break it down, simplify it, and make sense of it in a way you might never have done otherwise. Teaching sharpens your thinking. If you're worried that you're not experienced enough, remember this. You don't have to pretend to be a master. Just be honest about where you are. You're not teaching from the mountaintop, you're teaching from the trenches. People will respect that. You can start by sharing things you found helpful. Post your favorite resources. Share links to articles that inspired you. Talk about the books that shaped your thinking. Teaching isn't just about delivering answers. It's about pointing people toward the things that helped you grow. If you get stuck, think about the questions people are already asking you. If someone emails you asking how you did something, don't just answer them privately, turn it into a blog post or a video. If one person has that question, chances are others do too. The beautiful thing about teaching is that you never know who's going to find it helpful. You might post something simple, thinking no one will care. And weeks later, someone will write you saying it was exactly what they needed. Teaching isn't about showing off. It's about sharing what you figured out so someone else can figure it out too. It's about being generous with your knowledge, no matter how small it feels. So start now. Share what you know. You might be surprised at how many people are eager to learn. Chapter 7. Be seen without being annoying. The moment you start sharing your work with the world, you might feel pressure to promote yourself. That's normal. But there's a fine line between sharing your work and becoming obnoxious about it. Nobody likes a human spam machine, the kind of person who only talks about themselves and what they're selling. It's easy to fall into that trap. You get excited about what you're making, and suddenly you're posting nonstop, begging people to pay attention. But promotion isn't about shouting louder than everyone else. It's about being a good member of the community. It's about contributing something meaningful. If you want people to care about what you're doing, you have to stop thinking of promotion as a one-way broadcast. Think of it as starting a conversation. Show your work, sure, but spend just as much time listening, responding, and engaging with the people around you. Nobody wants to follow someone who's constantly yelling, "Look at me!" People want to connect with someone who's curious, generous, and thoughtful. If you spend all your time talking about yourself, you'll push people away. But if you take an interest in others, if you share what inspires you, if you celebrate what others are doing, people will naturally want to know more about you. The best way to promote your work is to think of yourself as part of a community. Every creative scene is made up of people who are sharing ideas, supporting each other, and pushing each other forward. The more you participate in that community, by sharing your thoughts, your influences, and your ideas, the more people will notice you. It's not about being popular or collecting followers. It's about finding your people, the ones who get what you're trying to do. Those people are out there, but they won't find you unless you make yourself visible in meaningful ways. One way to do this is to stop constantly trying to be the center of attention. Instead, become a fan. Share the work that excites you. Promote the people whose ideas inspire you. Celebrate the things that move you, and give credit where it's due. When you do that, you're not just promoting other people, you're showing the world what matters to you. That's powerful. When you're generous with your attention, people notice, They remember you as someone who's engaged, thoughtful, and interested. And when you share your own work, they'll be far more willing to pay attention because they know you're not just in it for yourself. Don't think of social media as a platform for self-promotion. Think of it as a space for connecting with like-minded people. Follow people who inspire you. Comment on their posts. Ask questions. Start conversations. Focus less on broadcasting and more on building real relationships. It's important to remember that nobody owes you their attention. Just because you made something doesn't mean people are required to care. You have to earn their attention, not by being louder, but by being interesting, thoughtful, and generous. The key is to keep the focus off yourself for a while. Instead of constantly posting about your own work, make a habit of sharing things that excite you. Links to great articles, amazing artwork, cool projects you've discovered. Be a curator of interesting ideas. When you shine a light on others, people will naturally become curious about what you do. When you do talk about your own work, make it about more than just self-promotion. Tell a story. Share your process. Show what you're learning. People love to see the behind-the-scenes stuff, the parts of your work that aren't finished yet. That kind of sharing feels human and authentic, not spammy. One of the best ways to connect with others is to offer help. Answer questions. Offer advice when you can. Point people toward helpful resources. Share what you've learned in a way that's useful to others. The more you give, the more you'll attract people who want to support you in return. If you're feeling stuck, ask yourself, am I sharing things that are helpful, interesting, or entertaining? Or am I just begging for attention? If your posts feel desperate or self-centered, try shifting the focus. Talk about the ideas you're excited about. Share the things that are inspiring you right now. Don't be afraid to ask for help, but do it thoughtfully. Instead of shouting, "Buy my stuff," try asking for feedback or inviting people to collaborate. People love feeling involved. When you invite them into your process, they become invested in what you're doing. The truth is, if you're making good work and sharing it in a thoughtful way, you won't have to beg for attention. The right people will find you. It might take time, but that's okay. Building an audience isn't about gaining instant fame. It's about creating meaningful connections with people who genuinely care. So stop thinking of promotion as a sales pitch. Instead, think of it as an act of generosity, a way of sharing what you love with people who might love it too. Be helpful. Be human. Be someone people actually want to hear from. And most importantly, keep making good work, because no amount of promotion can make up for work that isn't worth sharing. Focus on what matters most, showing up, staying curious, and sharing what excites you. If you do that, the right people will find you. No spamming required. Chapter 8. Turn criticism into confidence. Putting your work out into the world means opening yourself up to criticism. No matter what you make or how good your intentions are, someone, somewhere, is going to have something negative to say about it. That's just part of the deal. The sooner you accept that criticism is inevitable, the better off you'll be. If you're sharing your work honestly and authentically, some people will love it and others won't. And that's okay. The goal isn't to please everyone. The goal is to connect with the right people. The first thing to remember is that criticism isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's useful. Sometimes it's exactly what you need to hear. The trick is learning how to tell the difference between the feedback that will help you improve and the noise that's just meant to hurt you. When someone offers thoughtful, constructive feedback, pay attention. Even if it's hard to hear, those comments can help you get better. Maybe someone points out a flaw you didn't notice, or suggests an idea that makes your work stronger. Those kinds of critiques are valuable. Welcome them. Thank the people who offer them. But not all criticism is helpful. Some people just want to tear you down. They'll attack you personally, mock your ideas, or try to make you doubt yourself. Those people aren't trying to help. They're just trying to hurt. Don't let them get in your head. The best way to deal with haters is to ignore them. Block them. Mute them. Delete their comments. Whatever it takes to keep your mental space clear. Don't waste your energy fighting with people who have nothing to offer. It's not your job to win them over. Criticism feels personal, but most of the time, it's not about you. People bring their own baggage to what they see. Someone might lash out at your work because they're frustrated with their own creative struggles. Others might criticize you just because they're having a bad day. Don't take it personally. When someone criticizes your work, resist the urge to react immediately. Give yourself time to cool off. Walk away for a bit. Once the sting wears off, you'll have a clearer head, and you'll be able to decide if there's anything useful in what they said. If you can learn to accept criticism without letting it crush you, you'll have an edge. Too many people give up as soon as they face negative feedback. Don't be one of those people. Take the punch, brush yourself off, and keep going. The more you share your work, the tougher your skin will get. Over time, you'll start to see criticism for what it really is. Just noise. The negative comments will start to matter less, and the helpful feedback will stand out more clearly. But here's the tricky part. While you're learning to toughen up, you also have to stay open. You don't want to build a wall so thick that you stop hearing the useful advice. Don't confuse confidence with arrogance. Confidence means trusting your instincts, but arrogance means thinking you're above feedback. Stay humble enough to know you can always improve. One of the best defenses against harsh criticism is having people in your corner, people you trust to give you honest, thoughtful feedback. These are the people you can turn to when the noise gets overwhelming. They'll help you see what's worth paying attention to and what's just static. If you struggle with rejection, remember this. Every artist, writer, musician, and creator you admire has faced rejection too. They didn't get where they are because they never failed. They got there because they refused to quit. They kept showing up even when people told them their work wasn't good enough. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of it. Every rejection, every piece of harsh criticism, every no you hear is just another step forward. If you let it, criticism can make you better. It can push you to sharpen your ideas, clarify your message, and improve your craft. If someone criticizes your work and it stings, that's a good sign. It means you care. It means you're putting yourself out there. And putting yourself out there is the only way to grow. If you're never being criticized, you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough. The most important thing to remember is that your work doesn't define you. Just because someone doesn't like what you made doesn't mean they don't like you. Don't tie your self-worth to your latest project. Keep a little distance between who you are and what you make. It'll make the hits easier to take. When you're sharing your work, focus on the people who get it, the people who support what you're doing and encourage you to keep going. Those are your people. Don't waste your energy chasing approval from people who were never going to like your work in the first place. And whatever you do, don't stop making things. Keep showing up. Keep experimenting. Keep putting your ideas out into the world. If you can learn to take a punch and keep moving forward, nothing can stop you. Chapter 9. Stay genuine while getting paid. At some point, if you're serious about your work, you're going to have to talk about money. It's uncomfortable. Nobody likes to admit they're trying to make a living from what they create. But the truth is, if you want to keep going, you have to find a way to support yourself. The phrase selling out gets thrown around a lot, and it scares people into thinking that making money automatically cheapens their work. That's nonsense. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be paid for what you do. In fact, getting paid is what allows you to keep doing it. The trick is to make money without compromising what matters most to you. The goal isn't to chase trends or mold yourself into something you're not. It's to find people who genuinely value what you're making and are willing to support you for it. Start by being clear about what you're offering. If you're a painter, sell your paintings. If you're a writer, sell your words. If you're a musician, sell your songs. Don't overcomplicate it. Figure out what you can make that people will actually pay for. Once you know what you're selling, make it easy for people to buy it. Don't assume people will magically figure it out on their own. Tell them, put a clear link on your website. Make it obvious what you have to offer. People can't support you if they don't know how. And when you're talking about your work, don't apologize for asking to be paid. There's no shame in wanting to make a living from your creativity. You're not begging for charity. You're offering something of value. Be proud of what you make and the effort you put into it. That being said, money isn't everything. Don't let the pursuit of cash steer you away from what matters most. The best way to protect your creativity is to have more than one source of income. If you can find a stable job that pays the bills, you won't have to put pressure on your art to support you right away. A day job isn't a failure. It's freedom. It gives you space to experiment, to take creative risks without worrying about how you'll pay rent. A steady paycheck can protect your creativity more than you realize. The key is to separate your creative work into two categories: work you do for money and work you do for yourself. Sometimes they overlap, but not always. The trick is to protect the stuff that matters most to you, the projects that are personal, experimental, and meaningful, from the pressure to be profitable. If you're lucky, You'll find ways to make money doing the kind of work you love most, but even if you can't right away, that's okay. The important thing is to keep making things. Even if they're not paying the bills yet, don't be afraid to try different ways of selling your work. Maybe you sell prints, or digital downloads or merchandise. Maybe you offer online classes or workshops. There's no one-size-fits-all answer. You just have to figure out what works for you. And whatever you do, don't let your desire to make money kill your curiosity. Stay open to new ideas. Keep learning. Keep playing. The moment you stop experimenting because you're too focused on what sells is the moment your creativity starts to shrink. It's also important to remember that people don't just pay for the product, they pay for you. They're paying for your perspective, your personality, your story. That's why it's so important to keep sharing your process. The more people understand how you think and why you create, the more they'll want to support what you're doing. If you're not sure how to ask people to pay for your work, start by being generous. Give away what you can. Share ideas, offer advice, show your process. When you're generous with your creativity, people naturally want to give back. They'll see the value in what you're doing, and they'll want to support you. Selling your work isn't about pushing people into buying something. It's about inviting the right people to be part of what you're building. It's about showing them why your work matters and giving them a chance to support it. And finally, don't forget to pay it forward. If someone buys your book, your painting, or your album, thank them. Show your appreciation. Celebrate the people who support you. They're the ones making it possible for you to keep going. Selling your work isn't selling out. Selling out is when you stop caring about what you make and start chasing trends just to make a quick buck. Selling your work and staying true to yourself while you do it is a whole different thing. So don't be afraid to put your work out there. Don't apologize for wanting to get paid. Be proud of what you've made and let people know how they can support you. If you stay true to your creative voice and keep showing up, the right people will find you, and they'll be happy to pay for what you're offering. Chapter 10. Don't rush, just keep going. Creative success isn't about being a one-hit wonder, it's about longevity. The people who make an impact are the ones who keep showing up, day after day, year after year. They stick around. It's easy to get caught up in chasing overnight success. Social media makes it feel like everyone's blowing up, except you. But most of the artists, writers, and creators you admire didn't just pop out of nowhere. They built their success over time by sticking with their work and refusing to quit. The key to sticking around is figuring out how to keep going when things get hard, because they will get hard. Every creative path has dry spells, disappointments, and moments of doubt. There will be times when you feel invisible, or like your work isn't making an impact. The only way to make it through is to keep showing up anyway. One of the best ways to keep going is to focus on building a sustainable routine. Creativity isn't about working 24/7, it's about pacing yourself. Figure out what kind of schedule allows you to make progress without burning out. Show up regularly, even when you don't feel inspired. Inspiration comes from doing the work, not from waiting around for a lightning bolt to hit. Don't be afraid to take breaks when you need them. Rest is part of the creative process. Burn yourself out, and you'll have nothing left to give. Creativity is a marathon, not a sprint. The goal isn't to push yourself to exhaustion, it's to build a rhythm that keeps you moving forward. It helps to have a project that's just for you, something you work on for no one but yourself. When everything you make feels tied to an audience or a paycheck, it's easy to forget why you started creating in the first place. Having a personal project, a space to experiment, play, or just make something fun, can keep your passion alive. Pay attention to what energizes you. Creative work should feel hard sometimes, but it shouldn't drain the life out of you. If you feel like you're forcing something that doesn't excite you anymore, step back and try something new. Follow your curiosity. Let yourself wander. Creativity isn't about locking yourself into one path. It's about being open to where your ideas take you. Surround yourself with people who inspire you. Finding a creative community, whether it's online or in real life, can make all the difference when you're feeling stuck. Being around people who are making things reminds you that you're not alone. And when you're feeling unmotivated, those connections can reignite your excitement for your own work. It's also important to protect yourself from toxic influences. If you find yourself constantly comparing your work to others or feeling drained by negative people, step back. Curate your creative environment the way you'd curate a playlist. Fill it with things that inspire you and people who make you feel energized. Keep your sense of humor. Taking your work seriously is important, but taking yourself too seriously will kill your creativity. Don't be afraid to laugh at your mistakes, to poke fun at your failures, to let go of the pressure to be perfect. If you can stay light-hearted, you'll stay flexible, and flexibility is what keeps you moving forward. Don't get too attached to any one idea or project. Some things just don't work out, and that's okay. Letting go of something that's not working frees up space for something new. The important thing isn't to hold on to every idea, it's to keep generating new ones. When you hit a wall, switch things up. Try a new medium, experiment with a different format, or step away from your usual style. Creativity thrives on change. If you're feeling stuck, the best way forward might be to break your own habits and see what happens. Be patient with yourself. Building a body of work takes time. It's easy to feel like you're not moving fast enough, but creative growth isn't always obvious. Sometimes progress happens quietly, beneath the surface. Trust that the work you're doing now is laying the foundation for what's coming next. Don't measure your success by likes, followers, or money. Those things are nice, but they don't tell the whole story. The real reward comes from making things that matter to you, from building a life where you get to wake up and create. If you can find joy in the process itself, you've already won. Most importantly, remember that quitting isn't the same as giving up. Sometimes walking away from a project, or even an entire path, is the smartest thing you can do. Creativity is about evolving. If you're not excited about what you're making anymore, give yourself permission to start fresh. The secret to sticking around isn't just grit, it's love. Love for your craft. Love for the process. Love for the small, everyday victories that keep you going. If you love what you're doing enough to keep showing up, you'll outlast the people who quit. And in the end, that's what really matters. So stick around. Keep showing up, keep making things, even when it feels pointless. Because the longer you stay in the game, the better your chances of creating something amazing. Chapter 11. Creativity flourishes when we connect. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that creative success isn't about being the best. It's about being part of something bigger. It's about connecting with others, sharing what you know, and staying open to new ideas. Creativity doesn't happen in a vacuum. It thrives in networks, in conversations, in the back and forth between people who care about making things. When you share your work, you're not just building an audience, you're building a community, you're finding the people who get what you're trying to do. And those connections are what keep you going. It's tempting to think you have to lock yourself away and create in secret until you're finished. But creativity doesn't work like that. The best ideas come when you let people in, when you share what you're working on, when you talk about what's inspiring you, when you open yourself up to feedback. Showing your work isn't just about promoting yourself, it's about being generous. It's about offering something that others can connect with, learn from, or build on. When you share your ideas openly, you create ripples. The things you share today can spark something in someone else tomorrow, and that's how creativity grows. It's important to remember that your creative journey isn't a straight line. It's messy, unpredictable, and full of surprises. Some ideas will take off right away, and others will go nowhere. Some things you make will resonate deeply with people, and others will barely make a ripple. That's okay. The important thing is to keep showing up, to keep sharing, and to trust that your work will find the people who need it. You don't have to be a genius to make good work. You just have to be willing to try, to share what you're learning, and to connect with others. Creativity isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking good questions, staying curious, and being willing to learn in public. The best advice I can give you is this: stay open. Stay open to new ideas, new influences, new conversations. Don't get so attached to your own vision that you stop noticing what's happening around you. Creativity thrives when you stay flexible, when you leave room for unexpected connections and happy accidents. Be generous with what you know. Don't hoard your ideas or guard your knowledge like a secret. Share what you've figured out, even if you're still learning yourself. The more you give, the more you'll get back. Creativity isn't a zero-sum game. There's plenty to go around. Keep your sense of humor. Don't take yourself too seriously. Laugh at your mistakes, embrace your quirks, and stay playful. Creativity should feel joyful. If it starts to feel like a chore, step back and remind yourself why you started making things in the first place. Most importantly, don't quit. Creativity is a long game. There will be moments when you feel stuck. moments when you doubt yourself, moments when you wonder if it's even worth it. Those moments are normal. The trick is to keep going anyway. The longer you stick with it, the stronger your voice will get, and the more meaningful your work will become. If you're feeling lost, go back to the basics. Ask yourself, what am I curious about? What excites me? What's worth exploring? Follow those questions. Let them pull you forward. Curiosity is the engine that drives creativity. It's what keeps you moving even when things feel uncertain. And finally, remember that you're not alone. Every creative person struggles. Every artist, writer, and maker faces doubt, fear, and frustration. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't isn't talent. It's persistence. It's the willingness to keep showing up, even when it feels hard. So keep going. Keep sharing your work, keep connecting with others, and keep trusting that your voice matters. The world needs what you have to offer, but they won't know about it unless you're brave enough to show your work. That concludes Get Your Work Out There, 10 ways to share your creativity and be seen. Did these insights spark new ideas? Let us know in the comments. And for more strategies to amplify your work, subscribe and stay connected.